The sound of the champagne cork popping with a soft sigh should have been the perfect final note to a perfect day. I had closed the deal with Vanguard Industries, a $150,000 bonus. The number echoed in my mind not with euphoria but with a deep, heavy relief. It was the reward for months of sleepless nights, red-eye flights, forced smiles, and an exhaustion that I felt deep in my bones. For me, Morgan Blake, it wasn't a triumph of vanity. It was the key. The key to finally paying off the mortgage to my little sister Hannah's college tuition, to breathing without the utility bills tying my stomach into knots. Julian, my husband, held the bottle with a certain affected ceremony. His smile, the one that used to melt me with its spontaneity, seemed carved from wood. "To the winner," he said, filling the tall, slender flutes. His voice was soft, but the tone had a flat quality, as if he were reading a telegram. "To us," I corrected, taking my glass. The wine bubbled crisp and dry, but the taste failed to wash away a bitter aftertaste that had been with me for weeks. Julian had grown distant, an elegant ghost in our own Upper East Side apartment. He blamed his moods on the pressure at the Chelsea Art Gallery where he worked, but I wasn't buying it. There was something else, something hovering in the air between us, colder than the AC. "Damn, living large I see," a shrill voice like nails on a chalkboard. It sliced through the moment from the entryway. She hadn't rung the doorbell. Brooke, Julian's younger sister, had a key we'd given her for emergencies years ago, which had morphed into a perpetual free pass. She appeared in the living room doorway with the smile of someone who had just struck gold. She wore tight jeans and a designer t-shirt. I was certain she had never paid for. "I was just in the neighborhood and ta-da, it smells like a celebration. Did you guys hit the lotto or what?" Julian blinked, startled. "No, it wasn't surprise. It was something else. Discomfort. Panic." "Brooke, you didn't tell me," he began. "Come on, surprises are the best. Hey, Morgan." She walked over and gave me a quick air kiss, her eyes already scanning the room, mentally cataloging everything she could borrow or just take. "So what are we celebrating? A promotion, a rich uncle's inheritance, a new contract?" "Nothing out of this world," I said, holding back a sigh. Brooke's philosophy was simple. Life was a lottery, and she was entitled to all the jackpots, especially other people's. She didn't hold down a steady job. She lived off projects that never materialized, and the selective charity of her brother, which I increasingly suspected came from our joint account. "A contract? That's great," she exclaimed, throwing herself onto the sofa as if she owned it. "Well, we have to toast to that, right? I'll drink whatever, but if you have something good." Julian cleared his throat. There was a strange gleam in his eyes, a kind of contained feverishness. "I have just the thing," he said, and disappeared into the kitchen. He returned with a bottle of rare, pale, single-malt scotch and another glass. A very special reserve. I was saving it for a unique occasion. His words rang hollow. I watched his hands as he peeled off the bottle's seal. Julian's hands, which were usually so steady, holding a paintbrush or tracing my spine, were trembling. A slight tremor, almost imperceptible, but it was there in his fingertips as they gripped the neck of the bottle. When he poured the cold, golden amber liquid into the 3 glasses, his pulse was visible. He didn't spill a drop, but his knuckles were stark white with tension. "Are you okay, Julian?" I asked, leaning forward. "You seem nervous." He offered a grimace that tried to be a smile. "Nervous? No, it's just excitement for you." His gaze met mine and quickly darted toward Brooke, who was already eyeing the glasses greedily. "A family toast. That's what we need." He picked up 2 glasses, his own and one of the others. He handed one to Brooke, who took it eagerly. Then, with a clumsiness entirely out of character, he picked up the 3rd glass, the one closest to me, and handed it over. As he did, his index finger brushed the rim. I saw it tremble. It wasn't the shake of fatigue. It was a quick electric spasm, as if the glass were scorching hot. His expression was rigid, his jaw clenched, and a bead of sweat rested on his temple. Despite the cool temperature of the room, something flared inside me. A silent, piercing alarm. It wasn't logical. It was visceral. An ancestral instinct that cut right through the fatigue and satisfaction of the day. That trembling hand, that evasive look, that bead of sweat, they didn't add up. None of it did. Jealousy, resentment, maybe, but this was deeper. It was fear. Or something worse. "Thanks," I said, taking the glass carefully, avoiding the spot his fingers had touched. The liquor looked innocent. It gleamed under the lamplight. To Morgan, Brooke said, raising her glass, immediately anxious to drink. "And to her money, which comes in handy for all of us. Kidding, kidding." Julian raised his. His eyes never left my glass. "To the future," he murmured, his voice hoarse. My mind trained to detect risks in a contract to spot the trap in an ambiguous clause went into high alert. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe just end-of-the-day stress, but that instinct, the one that had kept me alive in boardrooms full of sharks, was screaming at me, "Do not drink from that glass." "Wait a second," I said, lowering my glass before it touched my lips. Both of them looked at me. Brooke with impatience, Julian with a sudden suffocating tension. I forgot the olives. "Those stuffed Castelvetranos, you like Julian. It's not a real celebration without them. I'll be right back. Come on later," Brooke protested. No, it'll take 1 second. We'll toast when I get back." I placed my glass carefully on the coffee table right in front of Julian. "Don't start without me." I walked into the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Are you crazy, Morgan?" I thought. "He's your husband. He's tense, jealous, that's all." But eyes didn't lie, and his eyes, when they looked at that glass, held the expectation of a predator. I opened the fridge and grabbed the bowl of olives with a quick, almost automatic motion. I glanced toward the living room. Julian had taken a step toward the table, staring fixedly at my glass. Brooke was distracted, scrolling on her phone. With the fridge door half open, partially hiding me, I reached out to the counter near the sink. There was another identical clean glass I had used for some water earlier. I grabbed it. With my other hand, I took the water pitcher and poured a couple of inches of crystal clear water. Then, in a fluid motion owed entirely to adrenaline, I stepped out from behind the fridge, set the pitcher down, and with the bowl of olives in one hand and the glass of water in the other, I returned to the living room. "All set," I announced, hoping my voice sounded normal. As I approached the table, I saw Julian had stepped back to his original position. My original glass was still there, untouched. Brooke looked up from her phone. "Finally, I'm dying of thirst here." "Sorry," I said. With a seemingly casual movement, I placed the bowl of olives on the table. Then, with the hand holding the glass of water, I made a broad gesture toward the balcony window, and as I lowered my arm, I placed that glass, the one with water on the table, exactly where my original glass had been. Simultaneously, with my other hand, I slid the original glass toward me as if picking it up, but instead kept it close to my body, out of direct sight. To the future, I repeated, lifting the glass I had just placed on the table, the one containing only water. Julian stared at the glass in my hand. His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, as if trying to gauge the level or the color. Then he forced another smile. To the future, he echoed and clinked his glass. Brooke cheered loudly for the cash. Cheers, all three of us drank. Me, the bland, cool water. Brooke, a long gulp of her scotch. Her eyes closed in pleasure. "God, this is good." "Expensive, right?" Julian took a sip of his. I watched him. His throat moved as he swallowed. Then a flash of something triumph, relief crossed his face before he could hide it. He relaxed visibly, his shoulders dropping as if a massive weight had been lifted. I, however, had that weight lodged in my esophagus. The original glass, the real one, felt as heavy as a brick in my hand, hidden against my thigh. I had to get rid of it. I had to think. "I need to take down the recycling," I said, suddenly standing up. I left the bin full of glass by the door, and with the heat, it smells awful. "Wait right now," Brooke asked, already pouring herself more from the bottle. "It'll take 1 minute. Keep going, enjoy." I grabbed my purse from the back of a chair, and with a rapid motion slid the problematic glass inside, wrapped in a tissue I found blindly. I felt the cold crystal through the fabric. I stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind me. My heart was pounding against my ribs. What was I doing? What the hell was I doing? In the trash room down the hall, I emptied the recycling bin into the large chute. Then I pulled the glass from my purse. The golden, immaculate liquid gleamed under the dim fluorescent light. I stared at it. Poison. Was it possible, Julian? A wave of nausea, not from the potential poison, but from the mere possibility of it, washed over me. With trembling hands, I shoved the glass deep into the bottom of my purse. I couldn't throw it away. Not yet. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I was imagining things. Surely. Work stress, my underlying marital issues with Julian. I had fabricated the whole thing. I would go back inside, drink some of the good stuff, and laugh at my own paranoia in private. When I re-entered the apartment, the atmosphere had shifted. Brooke was slouched on the sofa, laughing at something, but her laugh sounded forced, breathless. "I don't know, man, my head is spinning a bit," she said, bringing a hand to her forehead. "This stuff hits hard." "You haven't eaten much," Julian said. He was standing, looking down at her. His back was stiff. He hadn't sat down. "You drank it too fast." "No way, I only had one." Brooke tried to sit up but fell back heavily. Her face, previously flushed, was beginning to pale. Seriously, I feel weird. Like dizzy. Does anything hurt? I asked, stepping closer. My own voice sounded strange to my ears, my head, and my stomach. She gasped and suddenly pitched forward, a hand flying to her mouth. I think I'm gonna— She didn't finish the sentence. A horrific, guttural sound tore from her throat. She stumbled to her feet, then doubled over. A stream of vomit, first the contents of her stomach, then something foamy and whitish, spewed from her mouth, splashing the Persian rug. Brooke Julian screamed. His scream wasn't one of brotherly concern. It was pure, absolute horror. A horror that went far beyond mere surprise. Brooke collapsed to her knees, choking. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, searched for me for Julian. White foam bubbled from her nose and mouth. Her body was racked with violent convulsions. Call 911, I yelled at Julian, who stood frozen, petrified, staring at his sister as if she were a nightmare monster. I already had my phone in hand, dialing with fingers that barely obeyed me. As I gave the address to the operator, my eyes swept the room. The half-empty bottle on the table. Julian's nearly full glass. My glass, the water glass I had left on the table, was gone. My gaze darted to the kitchen. There on the counter, near where I had grabbed the clean glass, sat my original glass. Empty, gleaming. Washed, perhaps, or dumped. And then I saw the other one. Brooke's glass dropped on the rug beside her. A final puddle of amber soaking into the wool. No, it wasn't next to her. It was halfway between the sofa and the kitchen, as if someone had carried it from there and dropped it as they collapsed. My stomach contracted into a tight fist. Brooke hadn't drunk from her original glass for the second round. She had drunk from mine. The one I had left on the coffee table. The one Julian had handed me with his trembling hand. How? The answer was cruel and obvious. Greed. Brooke, seeing me linger in the kitchen, seeing my glass sitting there full and tempting while hers was empty, had taken mine without a second thought. Morgan's is definitely untouched, she would have reasoned, or she simply wanted more. Always more. Julian was still motionless, staring at Brooke, who now lay still, the convulsions, ceasing, a thin trail of foam leaking from her parted lips. His initial expression of horror was morphing. The panic was still there, but beneath it, rising like a toxic gas from the depths, was something else. Disbelief. An absolute soul-crushing confusion. It wasn't the look of a man watching his sister die unexpectedly. It was the look of an architect watching his meticulously perfect building collapse due to a fatal miscalculation. He looked at the dropped glass on the floor. Then slowly, as if moved by rusted gears, he turned his head toward me. Our eyes met over the convulsing body of his sister. In his eyes, for a fleeting but knife-sharp instant, I saw the reflection of his error. And he knew in that exact moment that I had seen it too. The wail of sirens began to tear through the Manhattan night from the street below, but inside the living room there was only a thick silence broken by Brooke's final terrible gasp and the hum of a poisoned truth that now hung in the prade. Air between us, deadlier than anything that could have been in that glass. The smell of wilting lilies and hot wax was thick, sticky like a nightmare's second skin. The viewing room at the Madison Avenue funeral home was mostly empty. Two distant aunts of Julian's, dressed in strict black, sat with their lips pursed. A couple of Brooke's club-hopping friends huddled in a corner, looking entirely out of place, whispering. And then there was us. Julian and me, separated by 3 empty chairs that felt like a chasm. I watched my husband from the corner of my eye. He wept. Or rather, he let tears fall in a studied manner, dabbing his dry eyes with a pristine handkerchief. His sobs were hoarse, theatrical, designed to be heard. There was no trace of the man paralyzed by horror that I had seen in our living room. This was a widower of his own making, playing the role of the inconsolable brother. Every time someone approached to offer condolences, his voice cracked with exaggerated grief. She was so young, so full of life, he would say, squeezing the person's hand with a grip that seemed more about survival than gratitude. I remained silent. My grief was real, but it had a different texture. It was a knot of rage, of misplaced guilt, and an icy terror that hadn't left me since that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty glass on the counter, Brooke's dropped glass on the rug, and Julian's eyes in that instant of pure, absolute bewilderment. Not the bewilderment of someone watching a loved one fall ill. The bewilderment of a murderer whose trap caught the wrong prey. "Morgan, sweetheart, you have to stay strong," whispered one of the aunts, Aunt Carol. As she passed me, her bony fingers clamped onto my arm. "The Lord doesn't give us a cross we can't bear. Though this one is so hard, so sudden. They say her heart just gave out. How fragile it all is. Yes, I mumbled, averting my gaze. Very sudden. The preliminary medical examiner's report cited acute cardiac failure with a possible undiagnosed adverse reaction to an unknown agent, perhaps exacerbated by the alcohol. A tragic freak occurrence. Case closed. Too neatly closed. Brooke, at 28, had no history of heart disease. She was a leech, but she didn't have a weak heart. On the silent, oppressive taxi ride back to the Upper East Side, Julian slumped against the window. I just can't believe it, he murmured, his voice raspy from his sustained performance. One day she's there, laughing, drinking, and the next she goes out like a light. Yes, I repeated, watching the city lights streak past. Like a light. Did you know Brooke had heart problems, Julian? He sat up slowly. What? No, of course not. Why nothing? It was just so specific. And sudden. That's life, Morgan. Cruel and random, he said. His tone held a bitterness that struck me as genuine, but it wasn't directed at her death. It was directed at his ruined plan. Just a stroke of bad luck. Bad luck, I nodded, tasting the venomous irony of the phrase. That night, while he slept or pretended to sleep, his back turned to me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The buzz of suspicion was now a constant hammering in my skull. Was I losing my mind, the stress, the survivor's guilt for not stopping it? Was it making me hallucinate monsters where there was only a resentful, distant husband? But my instincts had never failed me at the negotiating table, and now they were screaming. I reviewed every detail in my mind. The trembling hands, his insistence on opening that specific bottle, his fixed stare on my glass, his relief when he thought I had taken a drink, and then his horror when Brooke collapsed. It wasn't a brother's horror. It was the panic of a conspirator whose accidental accomplice had fallen into his own snare. I needed to find out something. Anything. Brooke had a big mouth. If Julian had planned something, maybe in his vanity or his need to brag, he had slipped something to his sister, his eternal co-conspirator in family deceptions. The next day, while Julian went out for a walk to clear his head, his eyes were bloodshot, not from crying but from lack of sleep. I made my move. I called Brooke's landlady in Brooklyn. I had her contact info from last year when Brooke had fallen behind on rent and Mrs. Higgins had called me the sister-in-law with the deep pockets to apply pressure. Mrs. Higgins, it's Morgan Blake, Brooke's sister-in-law. I really appreciate your discretion these past few days. Oh, honey, what a tragedy. So young. The police were already here asking silly questions, but you know kids today. Who knows what they mix their drinks with? The old woman's voice was a thin stream of gossip and morbid curiosity. Yes, it's terrible. We are devastated. Did she mention anything to you recently? Was she worried about something? I know her debts overwhelmed her sometimes. I prodded, maintaining a tone of familial concern. Debts, of course, honey. As always. But the other day, not even a week ago, I saw her looking much more upbeat. She was taking out the trash and told me, Mrs. Higgins, you'll see I'm going to catch up on all the rent soon. And I told her less talk, more action. And she got all cocky and said, no, this time it's a sure thing. My brother is going to fix everything. He's coming into a big payout, a very big payout, and he's not going to leave me hanging. And then she laughed. You know that little laugh of hers. The air rushed out of my lungs. A big payout. My bonus. The $150,000. Julian had promised Brooke money. For what? To buy her silence or her complicity, I see, I managed to say through a dry throat. Well, poor thing. Delusions. That's what I say. Delusions. And in the end, look what happens. Anyway, excuse me, I have to let you go. I hung up. My hands were shaking. It wasn't paranoia. Julian had talked about money with Brooke before my unexpected death, before he could inherit it all. The glass, the tremor, the promise of money, the sickening pieces were clicking into place. That evening, the tension in the apartment was palpable, a pane of glass ready to shatter. We ate dinner in silence. The clatter of silverware against the porcelain felt deafening. You need to go back to work, Julian said, suddenly not looking at me, pushing a baby carrot around his plate. Locking yourself up in here isn't good. Routine helps. Routine, I asked, putting down my fork. Your sister is dead, Julian. The one who came over for dinner every week. And you want me to worry about my routine? He looked up, and for the first time in days, I saw a spark of his old resentment unmasked by grief. Yes, my sister. The one who was always here taking advantage. As if it wasn't enough dealing with your obsession with work, your constant absence, having to endure my own wife, making me feel like a prop in my own house. And on top of that, her sister, always hanging around, always asking, never a moment of peace. The words fell like lashes. They weren't new, but he had never expressed them with such virulence, such accumulated hatred. Taking advantage of my obsession, I said coldly, measuring every word. My obsession pays for this house, Julian. It pays for your painting classes, your coffees at the gallery, the loans we never got back from Brooke. My obsession feeds us. Or would you rather go back to sharing an apartment with 3 undergrads like when we met? His face flushed a dark red. It's not about money, Morgan. It's about respect, about feeling like I matter. All that matters to you are your numbers, your clients, your success. And is that why you were so nervous the other day? I shot back, locking eyes with him. Why does my success make you feel so small that you couldn't even hold a bottle without shaking? He went dead silent. A shadow of fear, quick as lightning, crossed his eyes. Then he stood up, knocking his chair back. How dare you, he spat, his voice aiming for anger but landing on strangled. To insinuate that my sister just died, you're sick. I didn't insinuate anything, Julian. I just made an observation. You were shaking like you were terrified. Terrified of what we stared at each other across the table like 2 strangers, 2 enemies, discovering each other on a battlefield. The disguise of mourning had ripped open. You're hysterical, he spat, grabbing his jacket. Grief is clouding your mind. I'm going out. I can't be here with you right now. He slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed in the vacuum left by his absence. A vacuum that was now filled with venomous truths. It wasn't my imagination. I had hit a nerve, an exposed, guilty nerve. I waited until I heard the elevator ding and descend. Then I went into his study, a small room crammed with art books and half-finished canvases. His laptop, an older model, sat on the desk. He always used his new phone, but he kept older files on this laptop, things he probably thought were secure. I turned it on. It asked for a password. I tried his usuals. The name of our dog that passed away years ago. Incorrect. His birth date. Incorrect. I tried combinations. Nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered. Years ago, when we were happy, we joked that our password for everything would be the date we first met at that indie concert in Brooklyn. A silly romantic date. I typed it in without much hope. The desktop unlocked. A chill ran down my spine. He had kept it. A gesture from a past era, now a door open to hell. I didn't waste time. I checked recent documents. Nothing. The trash bin was empty. I opened the browser history. He had cleared almost everything. Almost. There were a couple of recent searches that had slipped through, perhaps made from his phone and synced. My eyes locked onto the lines of text and the world stopped. Benzodiazepines and alcohol affects death time. Symptoms, heart attack versus poisoning. Spouse inheritance laws. No will. New York undetectable toxins autopsy. The searches were dated 3 weeks ago. One was 2 weeks before the dinner. Another was the very morning of the dinner. I couldn't breathe. The keyboard blurred beneath my tears. They weren't tears of sorrow, but of a horror so absolute, so grotesque, it froze my blood. There it was. The cold, digital, undeniable proof. My husband had researched how to kill me, how to make it look like an accident, a heart attack. He had studied his crime, with hands that didn't feel like my own. I took screenshots and saved them to a thumb drive I kept on my keychain. Then I deleted the history of my access. My heart was in my throat. I shut down the laptop, leaving it exactly as it was. I stood up, swaying, and leaned against the wall. The room was spinning. Julian, my Julian. The man I had shared a decade of my life with had planned my murder with premeditation and research. And Brooke, stupid, greedy Brooke, had drunk my glass, my poisoned glass. Then came the rage. A white, silent rage deeper than any grief. I was saved by my own instinct for distrust, the very instinct he always despised, the one that made me the cold, successful woman, and he had killed his sister, killed her with the exact same indifference with which he would have signed my death warrant. The sound of the key in the lock yanked me back to reality. I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand and took a deep breath. When he walked into the living room, he smelled of cheap alcohol and smoke. He found me sitting on the sofa with a blanket over my legs, staring into space. "Still here?" he asked dismissively. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding foreign to me, flat. "Where did you go? To ruin yourself? To think? To get away from my accusations?" "They weren't accusations, Julian. They were questions, because none of this makes sense." I looked him straight in the eyes. In his blurry gaze, I saw the fear again, but also contempt. And something else. Determination. He had crossed the Rubicon. There was no turning back. I was a threat. Not just an annoying wife, but a threat who had discovered something or could discover it. Nothing makes sense, he muttered. For a second, his mask slipped, and I saw the exhaustion, the desperation of a man trapped in his own disaster. Nothing. But life goes on, Morgan. You know that better than anyone. Life goes on, and you have to keep moving with it. Yes, I nodded, clutching the thumb drive in my robe pocket like a talisman, like a weapon. Life goes on. You have to adapt. Survive. He nodded, unaware that we were fighting two entirely different wars, his to maintain the farce, mine for vengeance. I'm going to bed, he said. I'm exhausted. Me too. But first, I'm going to get a glass of water. I went to the kitchen, turned on the tap, and let the cold water run. In the reflection of the dark window, I saw my pale face, the dark circles under my eyes, but my eyes were dry and burning bright. There was no more room for grief. Oh, there would be, but it would have to wait. Now there was only room for caution, for intellect, for war. Julian had researched how to kill me and failed, but he wouldn't stop. A man who plots a murder and watches his sister die by mistake doesn't just stop. He moves forward, or he drags you down with him. I drank the water. I swallowed the fear. I swallowed the betrayal. I felt it forge into steel in my stomach. All right, Julian, let's play. But this time I set the rules, and I'm going to win. The thumb drive burned in my pocket like a hot coal. For 3 days, I carried the digital proof that my husband had researched how to kill me, but they were just Google searches. Circumstantial. I needed more. I needed to understand the why beyond just the money and resentment. And above all, I needed the complete how. The plan had more pieces. One of them had died on my rug. I had to find the others. Julian's computer was no longer an option. I had checked it meticulously after that night, but it was clean. He obviously didn't suspect I knew the password, but paranoia is an effective teacher. Now he used his phone, constantly keeping it on him at all times, even under his pillow. The old laptop was a dead end. But I remembered something from the history. Next to the macabre searches, there was a quick access link to Gmail. Not his personal account that I knew, but another one, jjthorn.art@gmail.com, an account he had never mentioned. Sitting in an internet cafe in Queens wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, I created a temporary email account, info@marquisejewelers.com. It sounded generic and professional enough. I drafted a brief email with a calculated touch of exclusivity. Subject: exclusive opportunity for select clients. Dear valued client, in celebration of Marquis Jewelers' 50th anniversary, we are offering a selection of our finest clients the opportunity to acquire unique pieces from our Vanguard collection at a 20% discount prior to official launch. If you are interested in receiving our private catalog, please reply to this email to confirm your shipping address. Best regards, the Marquis Jewelers team. I sent it to the mysterious jjthorn.art address, and then I waited. I refreshed the page every 5 minutes, sipping bitter, cheap coffee. 2 hours later, the reply arrived. The computer pinged, making me jump. From jj.thorn.art@gmail.com to info@marquisejewelers.com. Julian, is that you? You told me you would never write to this address, that it was dangerous. Did something happen? Is everything okay? Is it because of the other day I told you I didn't like this dangerous rush? It scares me. But if it's about the jewelry, I'm so excited, honey. You could have just called me from the burner phone, though. Please tell me something. I'm worried. Infinite kisses, Haley. The air froze in my lungs. Haley, a woman. Julian, is that you? Complicity. Dangerous rush. It scares me. A plan. Infinite kisses. A mistress. Everything clicked together with a dry, terrible sound like a cell door locking. The resentment, the distance, the weekend art fairs. It wasn't just the money, it was her. There was a Haley, and Julian had spoken to her about a dangerous rush. About fear. The same fear that made his hands shake when he poured the scotch. I logged out, cleared the browser history, and walked out onto the street. The daylight felt violent, alien. I needed facts, not conjectures. I needed a professional. A discreet search and a few calls from a burner phone led me to Victor Cruz, ex-NYPD, now a private investigator with a modest office in Midtown Manhattan. His voice on the phone had been calm, no judgments. I need surveillance, I said, sitting across from him in his austere office. There were no family photos, Just a high-end computer and shelves full of files. On my husband. And I need you to find out everything possible about a woman named Haley, associated with this email address. He looked at me with tired eyes that had seen it all. Motive infidelity, I assume. Assume something darker, Mr. Cruz. Assume attempted homicide. And assume the mistress might be an accomplice, or at least aware. His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second. He nodded without flinching. Assumptions cost extra. I'll need a recent photo of your husband, his details, his schedule, and a retainer. I gave him everything. The photo from our vacation in Cabo, where Julian was smiling with a naturalness that now felt obscene. His work details and a stack of cash. Victor didn't blink. I'll call you on this number, he said, jotting down my burner phone number. You'll hear from me in a week. Those 7 days were an exercise in continuous acting. With Julian, I played the shocked, vulnerable wife, drowning in a grief that he attributed to my guilt over Brooke. I clung to him. I cried on his shoulder. I asked him over and over, how could we lose her like this, forcing him to maintain his facade of mourning? It was exhausting and repulsive, but every time he flinched, every time his eyes darted toward the exit, when I got close, I knew I was planting seeds of doubt in his head. Was he suspecting I knew, or did he think I was just broken? His confusion was my ally. Victor's call came on the 8th day. We met on a bench in Central Park, far from prying ears. Your husband, Julian Thorne, has been in a romantic relationship for approximately 7 months, with Haley Silva, 25 years old, a senior art history major at NYU. He began without preamble, handing me a manila envelope. She lives in a rented walk-up in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He spends 2 or 3 afternoons a week there and some full weekends under the cover of art fairs or inspiration trips. She doesn't work. Middle-class family from Ohio supports her somewhat, but based on my observations, he pays her rent and some of her bills. I opened the envelope. Photos. Julian and a young woman with dark curly hair. Radiant. Coming out of a bodega. Hugging in the doorway of her building. Kissing on a bench near the High Line. In every one of them, Julian's face was relaxed, smiling the face of a man 15 years younger. The same smile I had forgotten existed in our home. And her? I asked with a voice I barely recognized. Innocent or willfully ignorant, innocent Victor said, lighting a cigarette. I reviewed her public social media profiles. She's effusive, posts lots of photos, quotes from poets' musings about art and about him. Look. He handed me his phone, showing Haley Silva's Instagram. Her bio read, living my favorite painting. I swiped. Photos of lattes, details of paintings at the Met sunsets, and then the first one of him. His face wasn't in it. Just his hands holding a brush over an abstract canvas. The caption, the hands that paint my piece. Another, the silhouette of a man against the light of a window. My rock, my hero in this tired life. One more, a blurry photo of a glass of wine on a table with 2 candles, little paradises stolen from time. I love you, Jay. I felt nauseous. It wasn't just an affair. She was in love, and he fed off that adoration, the glorified reflection she offered him, the exact opposite of what I represented. The reality, the bills, the success that dwarfed his own. There's more, Victor said, taking his phone back. It's barely legal gray area stuff. I accessed his personal email inbox. He writes from the account you gave me. She writes from hers. He's quite explicit in his disdain for you. Disdain. Quote from him. It's like living in a freezer. She only talks about numbers, about strategies. I feel invisible Haley like an expensive piece of furniture in her designer apartment. Or this one. She doesn't need me. She needs a trophy, and I don't serve that function anymore. You make me feel alive, necessary. And this one from a month ago, I can't stand this farce anymore, but she won't leave quietly. She's a lioness with her territory. We have to be smart. We have to wait for the perfect moment to break the chains without her dragging us down. The perfect moment. My fingers dug into the wood of the bench. Break the chains. With my death. With money that would be entirely his. And then a life with his admirer financed by my blood. Is there anything else, I asked dryly, staring at the duck pond. Anything concrete, money, insurance? Victor nodded, appreciating my direct focus. Yes. 3 months ago, your husband took out a life insurance policy on you with Global Mutual. Value $500,000. Original beneficiary, Brooke Thorne, his sister. The blow felt physical. He had made Brooke the beneficiary to buy her silence, or why? In his perverse logic, she was the only family he had left the natural accomplice. But Brooke was dead. And if the beneficiary dies, I asked already knowing the answer. In that case, and if no other specific beneficiary is designated, the capital reverts to the policyholder, your husband. But there's a crucial standard clause. If the policyholder is found guilty of the intentional homicide of the insured, the policy is voided and the company doesn't pay. It's the Slayer rule. I looked at him, letting the pieces lock into place in my mind. If I die, he collects the money, I said. But if he kills me and they find out he gets nothing, he would need an alibi, or for my death to look accidental, or for the blame to fall on someone else. Someone else, Victor concluded, exhaling a cloud of smoke. If you die under suspicious circumstances and there's another prime suspect, say, someone with opportunity and perhaps a circumstantial motive, the investigation could be diverted. He collects the insurance and he also inherits all your assets as the surviving spouse, unless there's a will stating otherwise. Do you have a will, Miss Blake? I did. Leaving everything to my little sister, Hannah, and some charity donations, but it was old. From before our marriage, Julian could contest it, allege undue influence, or simply, if my death was ruled an accident or an unsolved homicide, the state laws would grant him a massive portion. With the life insurance, he'd be rich. If Brooke was the original beneficiary, I muttered, thinking out loud. He couldn't kill me directly because if I died, the money went to Brooke, not him. He had to eliminate us both or have one eliminate the other. Victor nodded slowly. It's a theory, a highly twisted one. If your death looked natural or accidental, Brooke collected. Then perhaps Brooke with her lifestyle might suffer another accident. Or if he could frame Brooke for your death, the insurance wouldn't pay out, but he'd inherit your assets anyway. A mess. But the sister's death simplifies everything and complicates it. No, I said, suddenly seeing the chessboard with diabolical clarity. It wasn't a mess. It was his plan B. His plan was to kill me that night, make it look like a heart attack from stress from overwork. Brooke was a witness, yes, but a gullible, selfish witness whom he had bought with the promise of the insurance payout. Then Brooke would collect, and he would somehow take it from her later, or blackmail her for life. But I didn't drink my glass. Brooke, greedy as she was, drank mine and died. That ruined his original plan. But a horrific idea dawned on me. What if the plan has changed? If instead of framing Brooke for my death, he tries to frame me for hers? Victor let out a slow breath of smoke. It's possible. The police don't suspect foul play. But if someone planted doubts, if they suggested you and Brooke had tension, that you benefited from her death in some way with enough push, the investigation could be reopened. And you, Miss Blake, with your recent bonus, could be seen as someone with a lot to lose if her husband's sister became too demanding. I shivered. It wasn't paranoia. It was the twisted logic of a man who had already crossed the line. Julian was no longer my husband. He was my enemy. And an enemy who had tried to kill me once would try again or find another way to destroy me. I need hard evidence, I said, my voice now forged steel. Of the relationship with Haley, of the conversations about the plan of the purchase of the substance he used, and I need to protect my financial assets. Right now. Victor crushed his cigarette. For the first part, I need more time and resources. For the second, you should speak to a criminal defense attorney and a very, very good family lawyer. Move your assets to where he can't touch them. If you haven't already, I was already doing it. Discrete transfers, liquidating stock options. But I had to accelerate it. Keep tracking Haley, I said, standing up, and find out how he got the drug. High-potency benzodiazepines. There must be a record, a fake prescription, something. I'll try. Be careful, Miss Blake. A man who plans this once won't stop. I walked out of the park, the photos of Julian and Haley hugging stuffed into my purse. I no longer felt pain, only an intense cold and an absolute determination. He had started this war. I would end it, but not with poison. With his own favorite weapon, deception. I had to make him believe he had won, that I was a broken, docile victim, until I had enough proof to bury him. And I had to meet Haley. That girl who saw him as a hero. I had to see the innocence or the complicity in her eyes, because she, willing or not, was now a pawn on my board, and I was about to move her. The cold that had settled in my bones since Brooke's death became my ally. It was a shield, an anesthetic that allowed me to act when every fiber of my being screamed to confront Julian and rip his mask off. But Victor was right. A man capable of poisoning his wife would stop at nothing. I needed him to lower his guard. I needed him to get overconfident. And for that I had to play the role of a lifetime, the shattered, vulnerable wife drowning in a grief that absolved him of all suspicion. The opportunity arrived that very night. Julian came home late, smelling of tobacco and a cheap wine that wasn't part of his usual pretentious palate. He found me sitting in the dark living room, wrapped in one of his oversized sweaters, staring at the wall. I had redone my makeup to look pale, enhancing the dark circles under my eyes. "Morgan, what are you doing sitting in the dark?" he asked, flicking on a lamp. His voice sounded tense, irritated. I shivered a calculated tremor and looked at him with glassy eyes. "I can't be in the bedroom. The bed is too big, too quiet." My voice was a broken thread. "Everything reminds me of her, of Brooke, of her laugh, of what happened right here." His irritation vanished, replaced by cautious anticipation. He stepped closer. "You need to sleep. This isn't good for you. And for you it is." I asked, letting a single tear fall with precision. "How do you bear it, Julian? How do you stand not going crazy with guilt?" He froze. "Guilt? What guilt are you talking about?" "All of it," I exploded, slumping forward, covering my face with my hands. My sobbing was real, fueled by rage and fear, but I directed it like an instrument. For not doing something, for not seeing she was sick, for offering her that damn wine. It was in my house, Julian. She drank from my glass. I felt rather than saw him stiffen. My sentence thrown like a poisoned dart had hit the bullseye. She drank from my glass. I let the implication hang there, not as an accusation, but as a self-flagellating lament. He knelt in front of me with studied slowness. His hands took mine, pulling them away from my face. His fingers were cold. "Morgan, listen to me. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was a terrible accident, a freak twist of fate." His voice was smooth, syrupy, the voice he used to calm difficult clients at the gallery. Brooke was always like that. Impulsive. She took the wrong glass. Maybe she was already unwell. "You can't torture yourself like this. The wrong glass." I sobbed, looking into his eyes, searching for the trace of the lie. "It was my glass, Julian. The one you poured for me. The one we toasted with." I let a fresh wave of crying shake me. God, just the thought drives me crazy. What if there was something in that glass? What if it was something of mine? Something I took and she reacted to it? A medication? Something. It could have been me. His eyes widened slightly, a flash of panic, quick as lightning, followed by an even faster wave of relief. My performance was flawless. I wasn't accusing him. I was accusing myself. I was assuming the exact blame he had tried to plant. "Don't say crazy things," he said, squeezing my hands. His touch repulsed me. "You don't take anything. It's absurd. It was a heart attack, a tragedy, nothing more." He stood up, dropping my hands as if they burned him. "You need help, Morgan, a professional. This is affecting you too much." "A shrink?" I asked, sounding like a frightened child. "You think I'm crazy, not crazy. Traumatized." He ran a hand through his hair with a gesture of exhaustion that looked genuine, the exhaustion of a liar. "I'm destroyed too, but we have to support each other, not sink into paranoia." I nodded weakly, pretending to be convinced. "You're right. I'm sorry. I just can't stop thinking." "Then stop thinking about it." His tone grew sharper. "Look, I'm not sleeping either. But life goes on. You have your work, your things. Focus on that." It was the opening I needed. Work. I don't know if I can. I'm a wreck. Maybe I should take some time off. Go somewhere far away. He turned back to me, and in his eyes I saw the calculation return. Rapid, cold. The idea of me far away, weak and vulnerable, alone. It must have seemed attractive to him. Dangerous, but attractive. An accident far from home was always more believable. "That's not a bad idea," he said, moderating his voice. "A change of scenery. But not alone. I'll go with you. We can't be apart right now." "Of course not," I thought. "You can't let me out of your sight. Not until you've set up your next move." "No, I don't want to be a burden," I sighed. "Besides, you have the exhibition at the gallery. You can't leave. I'll go see Hannah in Chicago for a few days, see if being by the lake helps." He hesitated. The idea of having me far away, but under the supervision of my sister, must have seemed manageable. Hannah, a first-grade teacher, wasn't a threat. "Whatever you want," he conceded finally. "But talk to someone, Morgan. Seriously, I can't stand seeing you like this." No, of course you can't, I thought, because my mental deterioration would be a perfect argument for a suicide, or for you to commit me and take control of my finances. The next day, I put my plan into action. While Julian was at the gallery, I locked myself in the study and made calls. First to my wealth manager, Edward Cole, a discreet, efficient man I'd known for years. Edward, it's Morgan Blake. I need to make some moves. I want to diversify the liquidity from the bonus. Those offshore index funds we discussed last week, and I want to expedite the transfer to the private investment account. Yes, the majority of it. No, it's not urgent. I just want everything locked down. Instability makes me nervous. I wasn't lying. The instability of having a murderer for a husband was considerable. Then I called a criminal attorney recommended by Victor Franklin Reed. I told him, omitting my illegal investigations, that I suspected my husband might be involved in my sister-in-law's death, and that I feared for my life. His response was cold and professional. Without proof, Miss Blake, these are just suspicions, but it's smart to act with precaution. Document everything, any strange interactions, attitude changes, and above all, secure your financial position. If there's a divorce, or worse, you need independence, and record your conversations. In New York, it's a one-party consent state. A private conversation can be recorded as long as you are part of it. I hung up with a new objective. I needed a device. Something small, reliable. While searching online, a clear and terrible idea emerged. I had to confront Haley, not as the wronged wife, but as a stranger. I needed to see her, size her up, understand what she knew. Finding her was easy. Her Instagram profile was public and full of stories of her daily routines. She studied in the mornings at the NYU Bobst Library. I waited for her near the exit, wearing sunglasses and a silk scarf over my hair. I saw her walk out laughing with another girl. She was more petite than she appeared in photos, with a vivacious energy, a spark I had lost a long time ago. She wore a worn canvas backpack and ripped jeans. She waved goodbye to her friend and headed toward the subway station. I approached, feigning clumsiness, and dropped a handful of coins right at her feet. "Oh, I'm so sorry. How clumsy of me," I said, crouching down at the same time she did. "It's okay, I'll help you," she replied in a sweet, almost musical voice as we gathered the quarters. I looked at her. She had large hazel eyes full of a kind curiosity that broke my heart. This girl knew nothing, or chose not to know. "Thanks," I said, smiling shyly. "Are you a student here?" "Yeah, art history. Finishing my senior thesis." "It's torture," she replied with a sympathetic grimace. "I'm so jealous. I always wanted to study that, but I ended up in corporate finance. A total bore." I spoke with the light tone of someone yearning for another life. "But hey, at least it pays for me to travel and get lost in museums. I just got back from a solo getaway to Paris to clear my head, you know." Her eyes lit up. "So lucky, I dream of going. My boyfriend says he'll take me when he sorts some things out." A quick shadow of worry crossed her face. "Boyfriend?" I asked with benign, gossipy interest. "Artist. You look like the type to date an artist." She laughed. "A clear sound. Something like that. He paints. Well, he works in a gallery, but he paints. He's incredible. He has such a sensitivity. He's my safe haven." Her voice softened. "With all the chaos out there, sometimes he is my peace." "Your peace who plans murders," I thought, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Sounds wonderful. My marriage didn't go so well, which is why I'm taking solo trips." I lowered my voice confidentially. He was very cold, hyper-focused on his work. In the end, I felt invisible. Like an expensive piece of furniture, you know. Haley's eyes widened like saucers. She blinked, and for a moment I saw the recognition. Julian had used those exact words, her words, to describe me. "Wow, it's crazy you say that. My boyfriend, he went through something similar with his ex. She was an iron lady, according to him. Just numbers, ambition. Made him feel insignificant." "Poor guy," I said with feigned compassion. "People like that don't deserve love. They ruin good people like your boyfriend and like you. You seem like a sweetheart." She blushed. "Thank you. He tells me I brought the light back to his life. That with me he's living his true life without chains." She hesitated, biting her lip. "Though sometimes—" "Never mind. It's silly. It's just sometimes he gets a little dark, worried. He says he has to tie up loose ends from his past before we can fully be together. That it's a dangerous rush to act too soon." She shook her head to clear the thought. "But true love requires patience, right? A dangerous rush to act too soon." The words from her email. My blood ran cold. She wasn't an accomplice. She was a deluded romantic who thought she was living in a forbidden love drama, not a criminal thriller. Julian was using her, feeding her fantasy while clearing the path by her side. "Absolutely," I nodded with a sad smile. "Patience is everything. Well, that's my train. Good luck with your thesis, and take care of that artist. Sensitive men are a rare gem. Thank you, she said with a radiant smile. It was nice meeting you. I walked away. As I turned the corner, I leaned against a brick wall, trembling. It wasn't hate I felt toward her. It was pity and a renewed terror. Why Haley? In her innocence, she was a weapon in Julian's hands, a testament to his tortured soul, to his struggle to be free. If something happened to me, she would be the perfect emotional alibi. I got home before Julian. I had to move fast. In a drawer in my home office, I kept an old USB drive shaped like a keychain, a promotional gift from a tech conference. It was small, discreet. A quick internet search led me to a specialty electronics shop downtown. For a considerable sum, they sold me an identical keychain, but with a difference. It contained a high-capacity digital voice recorder and a nearly invisible omnidirectional microphone. It activated with a click on a side button. That evening at dinner, I put my new role into practice. I had ordered his favorite takeout braised short ribs and opened a decent bottle of wine. I've been thinking about what you said. I began pouring him a glass. My voice was soft, submissive. You're right. I need to stop torturing myself. Brooke is gone. It was an accident. And life goes on. We have to keep going. He looked at me, surprised, his fork halfway to his mouth. Seriously. I've been unbearable. I'm sorry. I lowered my gaze, playing with my food. You're my husband, the only family I have left. I don't want to lose you too. The lie burned my tongue, but the effect was instantaneous. His posture relaxed. A condescending, almost victorious smile touched his lips. He had won. The lioness was tamed, wounded, broken. You don't have to apologize, Morgan. We've been through hell. He took a sip of wine. But we have to be strong. Together. Together, I repeated, raising my glass. The keychain recorder was in my pants pocket. With my left hand under the table, I pressed the button. A soft, inaudible click confirmed it was recording. To us, to the future, the clink of the glasses was crisp on the recording. To the future, he repeated, and his eyes held a gleam that I could no longer mistake for love. It was greed. Relief. Hey, about Chicago. Maybe it is a good idea. A few days of rest will do you good. I can manage things here. I changed my mind, I said with a weak voice. I don't want to leave. I'm afraid to be alone. Besides, the doctor gave me this. I pulled a small blister pack of pills from my pocket. They were generic vitamins, but the packaging looked clinical. He says it's for the anxiety, to help me sleep. With this, and with you here, I'll feel safer. His eyes locked onto the pills. I saw his mind working. Medication, vulnerability, dependency. It was better than a trip. A medicated, unstable wife was even more manageable, more believable for a future suicide or domestic accident. Of course, honey. Whatever you need. He reached out and stroked my cheek. His touch felt like a reptile's scales. I'm right here for whatever you need. That night, while he snored beside me in heavy, confident sleep, I lay awake with my phone under the covers. I reviewed the recording. His syrupy, fake voice came through clearly. To the future. Whatever you need. It wasn't a confession, but it was a start, a record of his persona of the farce. The next day, while he went to work surely to see Haley, his safe haven, I stayed home. I had another objective, the study. Not the computer, but his things. His art books, his paints. I was looking for something. A remnant, a trace of the poison. It was impossible that there wasn't any left over. He would have kept it. He would have hidden it. A man like Julian, meticulous, proud of his intelligence, wouldn't throw away all the evidence. He would keep some just in case, for control or out of that arrogance that makes criminals keep trophies. I checked every thick book, every box of paints, every tube of oil. Nothing. Frustrated, I sat in his chair. My eyes scanned the room, looking for a hiding spot, a place that was his personal, that I never touched. His paintings, the ones he had done full of clumsy strokes and garish colors. I had always gently teased him about them. He would get offended, saying I didn't understand his expression. I approached a small, abstract oil painting, a mess of reds and blacks that always hung crookedly on a side wall. I took it down. Behind it in the drywall was a small, roughly carved hole. A crude hiding spot. My heart galloping, I stuck my fingers inside. I touched something cold and smooth. A small, opaque glass vial, the kind used for pigment samples. Empty, but not entirely. At the bottom, there was a whitish powder, an almost invisible residue. I left it exactly where it was. I couldn't touch it. It was the physical proof, the evidence connecting his internet searches to a real act. but I needed it to be tied to him undeniably. I needed the police to find it here in his study, in his hiding spot. A risky, diabolical idea began to take shape. I had to force his hand, make him get rid of it or use it and catch him in the act. But for that, I needed him to feel safe. Totally safe. And for that, I had to be more convincing than ever. I had to stop being Morgan the lioness and become Morgan the frightened sheep approaching the wolf for protection. I hung the painting back up, wiping away any trace of my fingerprints. Then I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had dark eyes with a cold fire in their depths. There was no more room for tears, only strategy. Julian thought he was playing chess with a novice, but he didn't know I had swapped out the pieces, and that his queen was already dead even if the board didn't show it yet. Acting became my second skin. Over the following days, I transformed into a shadow of myself. I spoke little, moving through the apartment with studied sluggishness, dropping small objects, feigning absent-mindedness. I left the blister pack of anxiolytics in plain sight on the nightstand. I took a vitamin pill every night with a glass of water right in front of Julian, letting out a fake sigh of relief. Do you feel anything, he would ask, observing me the way an entomologist studies a rare insect? A little groggy, but the doctor said that's normal at first. At least I'm sleeping, I would murmur, avoiding his gaze. Though sometimes, when I wake up, I feel a weird flutter in my chest, like a palpitation. It's probably just nerves. The word chest made his eyes focus on me with renewed intensity. I said no more. It was a seed planted. My next move required a broader stage outside the walls he controlled. One night during a silent dinner, I set down my fork. I've been thinking, maybe you're right about a change of scenery, but not Chicago. Somewhere further away, a place where nobody knows us, where we can breathe together. I let my voice tremble. I'm afraid that here among these memories I'll end up losing my mind, Julian. Julian looked up from his tablet. Where to? I don't know. The coast. Maybe Cape Cod. For a week. We can afford it. There was a gleam in his eyes, the gleam of the hunter seeing the prey wander into the clearing. A trip offered endless possibilities for an accident. A fall off a cliff, a drowning, a heart attack, far from any major hospital. It was even better than being home. It's an idea, he said, measuring his words. But in your condition, will you be okay to travel? The doctor said, stress is the worst thing for me. A quiet environment is exactly what he prescribed. Besides, I lowered my voice as if confessing a secret. I've been thinking about the future, about us. When all this passes, I want us to be okay. I don't want any resentment. I spoke with the lawyer. I want to draft a new will so that no matter what happens, you're covered. More than covered. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock. On his face, a war waged between instant greed and the sharpest suspicion. Why now? Is it a trap, Morgan, that's not necessary? He said finally, his voice oddly raspy. We're fine, aren't we? We aren't, I insisted with well-rehearsed tears. I've been cold, distant. My success made you feel small and I didn't see it. Brooke died in our home. I owe you security, peace. Even if something happens to me, I want you to have financial peace. It's the least I can do. The combination was lethal guilt, vulnerability, and a monumental payout. Greed overcame caution. If you really think it's necessary, he conceded, trying to look moved. But let's talk about that after the trip. Let's focus on getting you well now. Cape Cod, you said. It's quiet this time of year. Yes, I nodded, wiping my eyes. You pick the place. I don't have the energy to decide anything. He chose a charming, secluded rental complex near Provincetown, with a private pool and ocean views. He booked it himself with an enthusiasm he couldn't quite hide. I meanwhile made my own reservations. I called Victor Cruz. I need someone there, discreet, with the ability to act as a witness if necessary, and to record. On-site ops are expensive. Charge whatever you need. And I need something else. Access to my medical history. I need an entry to appear a recent consultation with a cardiologist and a mild but concerning diagnosis. Arrhythmia, paroxysmal tachycardia. Something that justifies medication and a possible syncope. Victor exhaled heavily into the phone. That's highly delicate, Miss Blake. Falsifying medical records. It doesn't have to be a hospital record. Just a consultation note from a private clinic on credible letterhead that my husband can find. A consultation that I, in my post-traumatic confused state, forgot to mention to him. You know people. I pay. There was a silence. I'll try. I'll give you a name and a number. They'll handle it, but the risk is yours. My whole life is a risk right now, Victor. Get it done. The next day, I received a text with a name, Dr. Eris, and an email address. I wrote explaining my needs. The response was cold and professional. The price and the guarantee that the document would withstand a superficial glance, though not a forensic investigation, was enough. I ordered it. The trip was surreptitiously monitored by one of Victor's men, a discreet guy who booked a room in the same complex, and according to the photos he texted me, spent the day reading by the pool. I faked a slight improvement during the drive up, pointing out the scenery with a weak smile. Julian drove with strange concentration, his eyes fixed on the road, but his mind, I'm sure, was elsewhere. The rental was beautiful, with a terrace overlooking a small community pool and the ocean beyond. The first day was tense calm. I tanned in the sun, pretending to read the keychain recorder always in my robe pocket. He took walks on the beach, talking on the phone in a low voice, with Haley no doubt reporting his progress. On the second night, I initiated phase 1. During dinner at a seafood shack, I suddenly brought my hand to my chest. I inhaled sharply and dropped my water glass. "Morgan, what's wrong?" Julian asked, startled. Nothing, I said, eyes wide open. "A sharp pain right here." It passed. I took a deep breath, exaggerating the effort. "Must be indigestion. Are you sure?" Yes. It was just a second. I offered a shaky smile. "Don't worry about it." But the seed was planted. The next day, while he was in the shower, I pulled out the forged document I had received by mail. It was a consultation sheet from Dr. Eris at a private Manhattan clinic, complete with a convincing logo. It stated in dry medical jargon that the patient, Morgan Blake, presented with episodes of supraventricular tachycardia. It recommended avoiding stress and caffeine and prescribed a low-dose beta-blocker propranolol in case of acute episodes. My blister pack of vitamins looked similar enough. I left it half sticking out of my purse, which I hung on a chair on the terrace. Then I went down to the pool. It was early, and there weren't many people. Just Victor's man reading his newspaper on a lounger on the other side. I got into the water, swam a little, and then climbed out, feigning a slight dizziness. I sat on the edge, my feet in the water, breathing deeply. It was time. With a studied motion, I brought my hand to my chest again, this time harder. I let out a choked groan loud enough to be heard. From the corner of my eye, I saw Julian step out onto the balcony of our apartment, drying his hair with a towel. I leaned forward as if struggling to breathe, and then, with a deliberate convulsion, I let myself fall sideways onto the concrete deck surrounding the pool. I hit with a dull thud. Julian's shout came from above. "Morgan," I heard footsteps running, but not just his. Victor's man was approaching quickly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" the man asked with a voice of genuine concern that deserved an Oscar. He knelt beside me momentarily, blocking Julian, who had just rushed out of the stairwell. It gave me just enough time to peer through half-closed eyes and see Julian's expression. It wasn't fear, it was evaluation, a rapid, feverish calculation. This was it. This was the moment. His eyes scanned my inert body. Then they looked at the pool water mere inches away. A tangible, lethal idea crossed his gaze. He could push me in right now. With a witness present, it would be a tragic accident. A syncope, a fall, a drowning. But the witness was a problem. Victor's man, playing the solicitous bystander, took my pulse. "Call 911, he yelled at Julian, who remained paralyzed. That snapped him out of his trance. "Yes, right," he said, and ran back inside, supposedly to get his phone. I pretended to slowly regain consciousness, coughing. What happened?" I mumbled, looking at the PI with glassy eyes. "You fainted, ma'am." In a low whisper, he added, "Your husband went to call the ambulance." I saw it in his eyes. He was thinking about it. Julian returned pale. "They're on their way." "How are you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Weak," I whispered. The pain in my chest. The ambulance arrived. It was all protocols. I showed them the blister pack of medication. I told them about Dr. Eris's diagnosis back in New York. After an on-site EKG, the attending medic didn't find anything acute, but confirmed it could be a benign arrhythmia exacerbated by stress. He recommended rest and following up with my cardiologist. Julian nodded to everything, the very picture of conjugal concern. But his eyes never left me. A mix of frustration and something akin to hope. I was sick, truly sick. His plan was more viable than ever. Back in the rental, pale and trembling, I collapsed onto the sofa. "God, Morgan, you scared me to death," he said, handing me a glass of water. His voice trembled, but not from fear for my safety. "I'm sorry," I said, taking a sip. I must be worse than I thought. That doctor in the city, Dr. Eris, gave me something stronger, just in case. I think it's in my purse. He went to the purse, which was still on the terrace. He pulled out the forged document. I watched him read it, his brow furrowed as he saw the clinic's name, the diagnosis. Then his eyes locked onto the prescription, propranolol, a real cardiac medication. He nodded to himself as if everything suddenly made sense. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, walking back over the paper in his hand. "I was afraid. Afraid you'd see me as even weaker." More broken, I confessed, lowering my eyes. He sat beside me. His heavy hand rested on mine. "You never have to be afraid of me, Morgan. Never." The lie was so thick you could cut it with a knife. This changes everything. You really need to take care of yourself. No stress, no shocks. I know, I sobbed, resting my head on his shoulder, fighting the nausea his proximity caused. What if something really happens to me, Julian? What if I get an attack like that and you're not there? His arm tensed around my shoulders. "Don't say that. I'll always be here." He paused, then, with a soft, venomous voice, he added, "But you're right. We need to be careful. With a heart like that, anything could be a trigger. A scare, a spike in stress. Even a bad reaction, mixing those anxiety pills with this heart medication. You have to be very careful with what you take." There it was, the gentle suggestion framed as concern. A bad reaction. He was giving me instructions for my own murder. He wanted me to mix the anxiolytics with the cardiac medication, which could induce respiratory depression or cardiac arrest. A tragic, believable accident. "You're right," I murmured, pretending not to catch the darker implication. "I'll be very careful." That night while he slept, I stayed awake. In the silence, I heard his rhythmic breathing. I took out my phone and plugged in my earbuds. I played the recording from the keychain I had kept in my pocket all day. The audio quality was crisp. I heard my groan, the running footsteps, his shout of Morgan Victor's man asking for an ambulance. And then back in the apartment, our conversation. His sentence echoed loud and clear. Even a bad reaction, mixing those anxiety pills with this heart medication. It wasn't a confession. It was a thread. A thread that, together with the search history, the hidden vial, Haley's phone, and her testimony, could weave a net. But I needed more. I needed him to make a mistake, to act. The next day, I announced that I felt too weak to stay any longer, that I wanted to go back to New York, to my doctor, to my home. He raised no objections. In fact, he seemed relieved. The trip had borne fruit. My illness was now an established fact in his mind and in mine. His desire to see me dead was a certainty. In the car heading back, I pretended to sleep. Occasionally, I'd open my eyes and see him driving with a clenched jaw, lost in thought. Once at a rest stop while he was in the bathroom, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text from the burner to a new number, Dr. Eris's. "It's soon. Get ready. I need an appointment this week. M." The number belonged to a dummy phone. It wouldn't reply. But if Julian ever snooped through my things, he'd find that cryptic message reinforcing the charade of my cardiac condition and my worry. Back in Manhattan, the tension shifted in nature. It was no longer just suspicion and faked mourning. It was a silent countdown. He knew I was a medical ticking time bomb. I knew he was the clockmaker waiting for the moment to detonate it. I had to force that moment on my terms. And for that, I needed the final element to draw him toward the poison he already had and catch him red-handed. The plan took shape in my mind, cold and complex as a chess match. I needed to exit the stage, give him the opportunity and the burning need to act, and let the evidence hang him. The air in the New York apartment smelled of dust and stagnant lies. The charade of the last few days, the trip, the fainting spell, had left a trail of electric tension that crackled in every room. Julian no longer watched me with the caution of the early days. Now he watched me with the eagerness of a surgeon studying a patient before operating. My heart condition was a gift from heaven for him, and it showed in the lightness with which he whistled in the mornings, in the almost paternal patience with which he asked if I had taken my medication. I, for my part, fine-tuned the details of the final act. I had the circumstantial evidence, the searches, Haley's testimony, the recording of his murderous concern. I had the motive, the money, the mistress. But I needed the irrefutable physical proof that tied him inextricably to the poison, the vial hidden behind his painting. I had to make him use it, or at least bring it out into the light. And for that, I needed to give him the perfect opportunity, the irresistible temptation. I needed to disappear. One morning as we ate breakfast in silence, I dropped my spoon into my yogurt with a gesture of sheer frustration. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice cracking with the genuine exhaustion of months of vigilance and fear. Sitting around, not working, wandering the apartment, it's driving me crazy, and my heart isn't getting better with all these nerves. Julian looked up from his tablet. The doctor said, "Rest, Morgan." The doctor doesn't live inside my head, I countered, letting out a shaky sigh. I talked to the office. There's a short trip to Boston, auditing logistics for Vanguard. One day, maybe 2 tops. Very relaxed, no pressure. I need to feel useful again, even if just for a couple of days. It will be good for me. I saw the flash in his eyes. Fast, voracious. A trip. Alone. With her delicate heart. It was even better than Cape Cod. An anonymous hotel in a city where she knew no one. Accidents in hotel rooms while rare happened. A heart attack in the tub. An accidental overdose of anxiolytics mixed with the stress of travel and her cardiac meds. The possibilities multiplied in his mind. I was sure of it. He pretended to hesitate, frowning with concern. I don't know, honey. It's risky. What if something happens to you there? Alone, I won't be alone. I'll be with the Vanguard team. And I'll call you every hour if I have to, I said, adopting a childish, pleading tone. Please, Julian. It's just to get out of this loop. If I don't, I feel like I'm going to explode. He reached out and covered my hand with his. His touch was dry cold. All right, if you really think it will help, but promise me you'll be careful, that you'll rest and take your medication on time. He paused significantly. Both of them, the heart meds and the anxiety ones. Don't let the rush make you forget and then you have a panic attack. The subtext was crystal clear. Make sure you take them all together. Let's see if there's a bad reaction. I promise, I whispered, lowering my gaze. When would you leave? The day after tomorrow. I'll be back the following night. He nodded, and an almost imperceptible smile of contained triumph touched his lips. I'll miss you. But you're right. A change of pace will do you good. That afternoon, while he went out blindly running to give the great news to Haley, I set the machinery in motion. I called Victor Cruz from the secure phone. It's time. I need you to enter my apartment tomorrow after I've left. I need cameras, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and a tiny third one angled to cover my husband's study, specifically the wall with the red and black abstract painting. I need them motion-activated streaming in real time to a cloud server I can access. That's illegal entry, and it may not be admissible as evidence, Victor warned, always practical. I don't need it to be admissible yet. I just need to see it and record it so I know exactly when to act, when to call the police, and I need something else. A warrant, a wellness check, whatever it takes for the NYPD to enter my apartment during my absence if I give them a credible alarm signal. Something related to a threat to my life tied to the investigation into Brooke's death. Victor sighed. That's much harder. But I know a detective. Russo. Homicide Squad. She's tough, but fair. I'll pass her an anonymous dossier with what we have. The searches, the insurance, the relationship with Haley, her testimony about the dangerous rush without revealing you as the source yet. I'll make her see there's reason to believe the husband might try to destroy evidence or commit an act against his wife in her absence. Have her put a flag on the address. If you call from Boston saying you fear for your life because your husband made a credible threat and you believe there's a dangerous substance in the house, they might move. It's a gamble, Miss Blake. It's the only gamble I have left, Victor. Do it. The next day, as I packed my suitcase with slow, deliberate movements, Julian stood in the bedroom doorway. Are you sure you have everything? He asked, leaning against the frame. Your medication, the doctor's note just in case, yes. Everything, I said, showing him the blister pack of vitamins and the fake paper from Dr. Eris. Don't worry, I'll try to sleep, eat light, and take things easy. Exactly, very easy, he repeated. His gaze lingered on my toiletry bag where the blister packs lay. Then he looked at me. I'll call you tonight to make sure you got there okay. Sure. His goodbye at the door was a cold kiss on the cheek and a squeeze of the shoulders. Take care of yourself, he said. And in his eyes, I read the true message, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I didn't go to Boston. I took a taxi to Penn Station, but instead of boarding the Amtrak, I walked out the other side, hailed another cab, and went to a small, secure apartment rented under a shell company Victor used in a nondescript neighborhood in Queens. From there on, a new laptop, I accessed the cameras his man had installed that morning. The feed was high quality. I saw the empty living room, the tidy kitchen, and in a small picture-in-picture window, the wall of the study with the ugly abstract painting hanging motionless. The first night, nothing. Julian came home late, microwaved some food, watched TV for a bit, and went to sleep. He didn't go near the study. Anxiety gnawed at me from the inside. What if he didn't do it? What if he decided to wait for a better plan for a real accident during my trip? But I had seen the urgency in his eyes. The opportunity was too good. He had to ensure there was no remaining evidence linking him to Brooke. And the vial, empty or not, was the most tangible proof. On the second day in the morning after my fake call from Boston telling him how relaxed everything was going, I watched him get up. He paced the living room with his phone in hand, talking to someone, Haley undoubtedly. His gestures were animated, almost euphoric. Then suddenly he stopped. He looked down the hallway leading to the study. He made a decision. My heart raced. I maxed out the volume on my laptop. Julian approached the study door, hesitated, and walked in. He stood in front of the painting. My view from the familiar, hidden in a bookshelf opposite the wall, was perfect. He stared at the painting for a moment, as if appreciating his own work. Then he glanced toward the door, listening. The apartment was silent. With a quick movement, he grabbed the sides of the canvas and lifted it off the hook, leaning it against the wall. There was the small hole. He carefully reached his fingers inside and extracted the opaque glass vial. He held it in the palm of his hand under the window light. He shook it slightly. The whitish residue shifted at the bottom. A cruel smile, relief mixed with contempt, formed on his face. I saw him mutter something to himself. I couldn't hear it, but I read his lips. Stupid. Referring to Brooke. To me. To both of us. He held the vial for another moment. Then he looked around. What he did next surprised me. Instead of taking it with him to throw it away outside or wash it, he walked to the adjacent bathroom. I tracked him with the living room camera, which had an angle through the open bathroom door. He opened the medicine cabinet, took out a small packet of makeup remover wipes, pulled one out, and meticulously wiped down the exterior of the vial, rubbing every millimeter. Then he walked back into the study, but he didn't put it back in the wall. He walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small manila envelope. He slipped the wiped vial inside, sealed it, and tucked it into the interior breast pocket of a jacket hanging on the coat rack. He wasn't throwing it away yet. Why a trophy? Or did he think he might still need it? Perhaps if my accident in Boston didn't happen naturally, he would have to improvise upon my return, and the poison or its residue could still be useful. It was enough. I had the crisp video from multiple angles of Julian retrieving the vial from his hiding spot, handling it, wiping it, and hiding it in his jacket. It was the physical link between him and the murder weapon. Now I needed the police to find it on his person, and it had to be now before he left the apartment and tossed it into some random dumpster. My hands shook over the keyboard. I opened an audio distortion program Victor had provided. I dialed the precinct number he had given me, asking for Detective Russo. A dry female voice answered. Detective Russo. I pressed a button and spoke in a high, trembling voice scrambled by the software. Detective, I'm a neighbor in the building on East 73rd. Apartment 8A. I've been hearing screaming, violent arguments from Mr. Thorne's apartment. There was a death there recently, you know. The sister. And now I heard the husband screaming something about a vial, about how it had to disappear, and something about like the other one. I'm terrified. His wife isn't home, she's traveling. Please send someone, ma'am. What is your name? Please. No, I can't. He would see me. Please just send someone right now. I think he has something dangerous. I hung up. It wasn't a perfect call, but it was urgent, and it came from an anonymous witness who knew details of the previous death. If Victor had done his job and planted the seed with Russo, this might be the trigger. I waited, my eyes glued to the screen. Julian was in the living room. He had turned on the TV. He looked relaxed, almost euphoric. He checked his phone and smiled. 10 minutes. 15. Desperation started to claw at me. They weren't coming. Then, on the entryway camera, I saw a shadow through the frosted glass of the front door. The doorbell rang. Julian jumped. He frowned, stood up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. His expression shifted from surprise to caution. He hesitated. They knocked again, louder with authority. Finally, he opened it but kept the chain lock engaged. I couldn't hear well, but I saw his lips move. Yes, can I help you? The response came from off-camera, but I watched the blood drain from Julian's face. He shook his head vehemently. He tried to shut the door, but someone shoved it from the outside. The chain snapped or gave way to the force. 3 people stepped into the foyer. 2 were plainclothes officers, a man and a woman looking deadly serious. The third was an older woman with short graying hair and a gaze that even through a pixelated screen radiated frigid authority. Detective Russo. Julian backed up, raising his hands in a gesture of, "What is the meaning of this?" His mouth moved rapidly, protesting. Russo spoke briefly, flashing a badge. Then her eyes scanned the foyer, the living room. She gave a sharp order. The two officers dispersed, one toward the living room, the other down the hallway. Julian, alarmed, tried to step in their way. "This is a violation. My wife isn't even here. You have no right." Russo spoke to him again, gesturing calmly for him to back down. At that moment, the officer who had gone down the hall returned. He said something to Russo and pointed toward the study. Russo looked at Julian, then, with a decisive gesture, marched toward the study. Julian followed her, still protesting, but his voice was losing its confident edge. "From my hidden camera in the study, I watched them enter." Russo looked around, her professional gaze evaluating the room. It landed on the painting still leaning against the wall and the visible jagged hole behind it. Then she looked at Julian. She asked him a question. He shook his head, waving a hand at the painting as if to say, "That's nothing." That was when the other officer who had been searching the living room walked into the study. In his hand, held carefully with a handkerchief, was Julian's jacket, the one from the coat rack. Julian froze, his face completely unraveled. Every ounce of color vanished from his cheeks. Russo took the jacket. She slipped her gloved hand into the interior breast pocket and pulled out the manila envelope. She opened it carefully, and there it was, the small opaque glass vial. She held it up to the light exactly as Julian had done minutes before. Then she looked at him. Her expression was inscrutable, but her posture had shifted, becoming rigid, dangerous. What happened next was almost anticlimactic. Julian didn't scream, he didn't fight, he just deflated. His shoulders slumped. He let out a sigh that seemed to come from the very bottom of his soul, a sound of absolute final defeat. His lips moved, and this time the camera picked up the audio faintly. It was a hoarse whisper directed at no one, or perhaps at the hell he had built for himself. "No, it wasn't for her." Russo stepped closer. "What did you say, Mr. Thorne? It wasn't for who?" He looked up, and his eyes, blind with panic, met the detective's. But he didn't answer. He just shook his head over and over like a child caught in a lie too enormous to talk his way out of. Detective Russo gave another order. One of the officers firmly but without brutality grabbed Julian by the arm. "Julian Thorne, you are being detained on suspicion of possession of a potentially toxic substance in connection to an ongoing investigation. You have the right to remain silent." The officer's voice faded into a ringing in my ears. I watched them march out of the study, Julian walking with his head bowed, flanked by the cops. Russo stayed behind, examining the vial, then the hole in the wall. She pulled out a radio and spoke briefly. "Requesting crime scene unit." On my screen, my living room, my study, my home were swarming with strangers dismantling the poisoned life I had shared with that man. But I was no longer there. I was in an anonymous apartment in Queens, trembling tears streaming down my face unchecked. They weren't tears for him. Not even for Brooke. They were for the woman I had been, for the life I thought I had, for the sheer enormity of the betrayal, and for the savage, painful relief that the nightmare was finally over, or at least this part of it. I looked at the screen. Detective Russo stood alone in the study, staring intently at the vial in her gloved hand. "Because of you, Brooke is dead," I thought, rehearsing the words I would say to him later when everything came to light. "And now, Julian, it's your turn to rot." I slammed the laptop shut. The room went pitch black, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. The net had finally closed, and he was caught inside. The air in the homicide squad precinct smelled of stale coffee, cold sweat, and cheap desperation. I sat in a tiny waiting room with Victor by my side, a silent, solid presence. I had spent the night awake, mentally reviewing every move, every recording, every piece of evidence. Now, dressed in a sharp charcoal pantsuit, my hair pulled back into a severe bun, I felt like a general before the final battle. I was not the shattered wife. I was Morgan Blake, the negotiator, and I had come to close the most important deal of my life. Detective Russo walked into the room. She wore the same suit as the day before, but her face showed exhaustion mixed with sharp intensity. She held a manila folder. "Miss Blake, thank you for coming in so quickly. We've run a preliminary analysis on the vial. Traces of high-potency benzodiazepines. Clonazepam specifically cut with an inert filler powder. It matches the compound found in your sister-in-law Brooke Thorne's stomach. And it matches the search history we pulled from your husband's laptop." I nodded. There was no emotion in my gesture. "He denies all knowledge," Russo continued. He says the vial isn't his, that it must have been his sister's, that someone planted it. He admits the jacket is his, but claims anyone could have slipped it in. A desperate story. Russo paused, locking her gray eyes onto mine. But we have more. We brought in Miss Haley Silva. Her statement is enlightening. She confirms the affair. She talked about your husband's pressure, his disdain for you, his desire to break the chains. She even admitted he talked about waiting for the perfect moment. But she refuses to believe he was capable of violence. She views him as some tragic romantic. Can I see him? I asked, my voice serene. Julian. And her. Separately. Russo studied my face. It is highly irregular, but given the circumstances and the information your private investigator so generously supplied us anonymously, I can permit a supervised encounter in the interrogation room. I will be present and it will be recorded. You are not a police officer, but you can ask questions. He can refuse to answer, but the situation itself might provoke a reaction. It's all I ask. The interrogation room was a sterile white box with a metal table and 3 chairs. The smell of disinfectant couldn't hide the ancient fear that sweated from the walls. I sat in a chair facing the door. Russo stood by the two-way mirror. A minute later, the door opened and Julian walked in. He looked as though he had aged 10 years in a single night. He wore the same clothes, now wrinkled. Stubble darkened his jaw and his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with deep, bruised shadows. When he saw me, he stopped dead in his tracks. A rapid succession of emotions crossed his face. Surprise, rage, a flicker of hope, and finally a pure naked hatred. You, he spat. What are you doing here? Come to enjoy the show. The detective asked me to come. I said with a calm that seemed to enrage him further. It seems there are problems, Julian. Problems you created. He lunged toward the table, but Russo stepped forward and he froze. It was you, your anonymous tip, he yelled. Your revenge for Brooke, you're insane, Morgan. Absolutely crazy. If you think, sit down. Mr. Thorne Russo ordered, her voice neutral. Your wife is here as part of the investigation. He slumped into the chair across from me. His gaze never left my face, searching for a crack, a weakness. He found none. What do you want? He asked, his voice raspy. The truth, Julian. Enough lies. I placed my hands flat on the table. Why, Julian? The money, her. Both. I don't know what you're talking about. That vial isn't mine. Brooke must have been into some bad shit. I just found it and I kept it to prevent things from getting more complicated. You found it, I repeated, a trace of incredulity bleeding into my voice. Behind a hole in the wall, behind your own painting in your study. A very elaborate hiding spot for something you just found. She could have left it there. Or you could have planted it to frame me, he shouted, slamming his fist on the metal table. You're jealous of Haley. You want to destroy me, Russo intervened. The computer forensics, Mr. Thorne. The searches about benzodiazepines and poison versus heart attacks. Did your sister or your wife make those too? He paled, swallowing hard. That wasn't me. Someone hacked my laptop or used my login. And the life insurance, I continued, pulling a copy of the policy Victor had obtained from my purse. I slid it across the table. $500,000. Original beneficiary Brooke. Why, Julian, a gift for your sister right after I closed a massive bonus. And right before she died, what a coincidence. It was a gesture. To help her. His voice cracked. You don't understand. You never understood family blood ties. You only understand bank accounts. I understand patterns, Julian. And this pattern stinks. I opened my purse again and pulled out a transcript of the recording from our dinner after the Cape Cod trip. I tapped a highlighted line. Right here, you say, with a heart like that, anything could be a trigger, a scare, a spike in stress. Even a bad reaction, mixing those anxiety pills with this heart medication. Conjugal concern, Julian. Or instructions. He stared at the paper, then looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. You recorded me. You bitch. You set a trap for me. You set the trap, Julian. For me. Only Brooke, with her eternal greed, drank my glass. I let the cold, heavy words drop into the silence of the room. You wanted to poison me, make it look like a heart attack. For the money. For Haley. To get rid of the lioness who made you feel small. You researched it. You bought the poison. You put it in my glass that night. But you were shaking. You were shaking so badly that I noticed, and I swapped the glasses. Brooke saw my full glass and she drank it. She died because of you. Because of your mistake. Your greed. Every word was a hammer blow. His defenses shattered. He gasped like a fish out of water, shaking his head, but there was no conviction left, only panic. No, it's not true. It's a demented theory. And Haley, I asked, pivoting my attack, you're safe haven. You told her about the dangerous rush, about tying up loose ends. She told the police everything. She thinks it's a forbidden love story. She doesn't know it's a murderer's alibi. Leave Haley out of this, he roared, leaping up. Russo stepped in again, forcing him down. She has nothing to do with it. She's innocent, he cried. Just like Brooke was, I said without flinching. Just like I was in your plan. We are all pawns on your board, Julian. But the game is over. We have the vial with your prints wiped but hidden in your jacket. We have the search history. We have the motive. We have your mistress's testimony. And we have my testimony, my recordings, and the hidden camera footage that filmed you retrieving the vial yesterday. That last part was a slight bluff. The camera hadn't caught fingerprints, but he didn't know that. His resistance broke entirely. He collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. A dry, tearing sob shook his shoulders. They weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustrated rage of terror, staring into the abyss. It was for you, he mumbled, his voice muffled by his hands. Only for you. She shouldn't have touched it. The greedy bitch right to the end. She ruined everything. The twisted, self-indulgent confession hung in the air like a tombstone. Russo remained impassive, though her eyes narrowed. I didn't move a muscle. Why, Julian? I asked one last time, even though I already knew. He raised his head. His eyes swimming with furious tears bored into me. Because I couldn't take you anymore. Always the best, the smartest, the one who paid for everything. I was your +1 Morgan. Your expensive prop. Haley. Haley looked at me like I was somebody. And the money was mine too. I deserved it after putting up with you all these years, Brooke. Brooke was just a stupid mistake. He broke down crying for real this time, but his words were repulsive. I didn't want her to die, just you. Russo nodded to a uniformed officer watching through the glass. It was enough. The door opened and 2 cops walked in. Julian didn't even protest as they cuffed him. He let himself be hauled up, hunched and defeated, muttering incoherent sobs about Haley, about the money, about how unfair it all was. When the door clicked shut, the silence was absolute. I took a deep breath, exhaling the toxic air I had been holding in for months. Russo approached me. It's a partial confession made in a state of shock but useful. Combined with the rest of the evidence, it's more than enough for an indictment. He'll lawyer up, of course, but it's a long, steep road for him. She paused. You took a massive risk, Miss Blake. Investigating on your own. It could have gone very wrong. I didn't have a choice, detective. He had already killed once by mistake. I was next. Russo nodded, a shadow of respect in her gaze. Miss Silva is in the adjacent room. Do you want to see her? It's not required. No, it's not. But yes, I want to see her. Haley was sitting in a similar room, crying silently. When I walked in, she wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a childish gesture. Her puffy red eyes widened in confusion when she recognized me. You're the woman. From the campus. Yes. And I'm Morgan Blake, Julian's wife. The Iron Lady he told you about. She went chalk white. No, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. He told me. He said you two were separated. That it was a cold relationship just for convenience. That you had someone else. Julian lies about everything, Haley. I sat across from her. I felt no hostility. In her face, I only saw the pain of a brutal truth. I don't blame you. He manipulated you, used you. But I need you to know the truth because the police are going to keep asking you questions. Julian tried to murder me, to poison me, and instead his sister Brooke died, by mistake. He researched how to do it. He bought the poison. He planned the whole thing for money and to be with you. You were his prize. I was the obstacle. She shook her head slowly, as if her ears were rejecting the words. No, he's not like that. He's sensitive. He's an artist. He's tormented, but not a murderer. I cut her off gently but firmly. He just confessed, Haley, in the other room. He said I was the target, that Brooke was a mistake, and that you made him feel like a somebody. Haley covered her mouth with both hands. A muffled wail escaped through her fingers. Her entire world of poetic quotes, forbidden love of being his safe haven, crumbled, revealing the criminal rot beneath her feet. The trip, the rush he talked about, she managed to articulate. It was the rush to kill me before I myself figured out his plan. You warned him that it was a dangerous rush. You were right. It was dangerous because he was a murderer. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, her heartbreak echoing in the sterile room. I didn't say anything else. There was no possible comfort for the destruction Julian had caused. I stood up and walked out. In the hallway, Victor Cruz was waiting. "Everything good?" he asked. "Good enough." We walked toward the exit. At the precinct doors, the daylight hit me full force. I took a deep breath. The cold New York air filled my lungs. And my fake diagnosis. The cameras. I asked. "Detective Russo is smart. She knows there was some manipulation on your end, but the core evidence is solid, obtained legally after an anonymous tip. Your little theater production in Cape Cod and the fake doctor's note. It's in their best interest to let it slide. They don't want to muddy a solid murder and attempted homicide case. You were a victim who defended herself using questionable methods, but you defended yourself. There won't be any charges against you." An immense relief, though not a joyful one, washed over me. It was the end. Or the beginning of the end. Days later, at the arraignment hearing, I saw Julian again. He was emaciated, wearing a suit that was now too big for him, flanked by his public defender. Haley wasn't there. Victor told me she had moved back to Ohio with her parents. When I was called to give my statement, I told my story, the public version. The suspicion after Brooke's death, discovering the search history, finding the vial, my fear. I omitted the swapping of the glasses on the advice of my lawyer, Franklin Reed. I said I noticed his nervousness got scared and that Brooke, by sheer chance, drank from my glass. It was technically true and spared me uncomfortable questions about why I hadn't immediately called the cops. Then I testified that, terrified, I hired a PI and installed cameras to protect myself, which led to the footage of him retrieving the vial. It was a credible narrative, the terrified wife defending herself. Julian glared at me with pure hatred throughout my testimony, but he didn't yell anymore. He looked hollow. His defense was weak, centering on alleged evidence tampering and my supposed vengeful framing. It convinced no one. At the end of the hearing, before they led him away, I approached the defense table under the watchful eyes of the court officers. His lawyer tried to step between us, but Julian raised a hand. He wanted to hear it. We looked at each other. There were no more masks, only the abyss of what had been and what he had destroyed. "Because of you, Brooke is dead," I said in a clear, low voice that only he could hear. "Rot in prison, Julian." There was no response, just a rapid blink. Then he looked away, fixing his eyes on the wooden table. Defeated. There were no apologies, no genuine remorse, only failure. I walked out of the courthouse. The steps were bathed in a pale winter sun. Victor Cruz was waiting by his car. "Home?" he asked. I looked back at the gray building I had just left. My old life was buried in there among case files and confessions. I took a deep breath. "No. Take me to my lawyer's office. I have a divorce to finalize and a life to rebuild." I got into the car. I didn't look back. For the first time in a very, very long time, the road ahead, however uncertain, was entirely mine. The verdict came 8 months later on a gray autumn day in Manhattan that smelled of rain and wet asphalt. I didn't go to the sentencing. My divorce attorney, Evelyn Grant, a woman as severe and efficient as forged steel, called me. Her voice, always professional, held a glimmer of satisfaction. Life without the possibility of parole. The maximum for murder in the first degree and attempted murder. No mitigating circumstances. The confession, however, twisted, and the mountain of evidence crushed them. That girl Haley testified. She was devastating for the defense, even though she cried the whole time. She talked about the rush, the fear, how he manipulated her. The judge was clear. He is a dangerous man with no genuine remorse. I listened, leaning against the window frame of my new apartment, a bright penthouse in Tribeca, overlooking the skyline. It wasn't the Upper East Side apartment. I had sold that along with almost everything inside it. The furniture, the paintings, the memories. It had all been swept away in a quick, anonymous estate sale. The money, along with what I recovered from the rapid divorce facilitated by Julian's criminal conviction, was secure, dispersed in accounts only I controlled. And the life insurance I asked, voided. The Slayer rule applies automatically with the conviction. Global Mutual won't pay a cent. As for the marital assets, because he was convicted of attempting to murder his spouse, you are entitled to the entirety of it. It's all been transferred. You are a very wealthy woman, Morgan. I didn't feel wealthy. I felt light and terrible. The wealth was a byproduct of a catastrophe, not a triumph. Thank you, Evelyn, for everything. It was a pleasure, though I hope I never have to represent you in a case like this again. Take care. I hung up. The silence of the apartment was vast comfortable. There were no echoes of foreign footsteps of breathing that wasn't mine. At first, the silence had terrified me. Now I was beginning to appreciate it. A few weeks later, the intercom buzzed. It was the doorman. Miss Blake, there is a young woman here, a Haley Silva. She says she only needs a moment. I wasn't surprised. I had been expecting it, or rather I knew it would happen eventually. Send her up, please. I watched her step out of the elevator. She looked even smaller, swallowed up by an oversized brown coat. Her dark curls were tied back carelessly, and the dark circles under her eyes were profound. But the romantic spark in her eyes was gone, replaced by a mature sadness and a tired determination. Come in, Haley. She walked in looking around with an unfamiliar timidity. It's very beautiful, very bright. Is it new? Yes. Sit down. Coffee, tea. No, thank you. I won't bother you long. She perched on the edge of the sofa as if afraid to stain it. I wanted to see you. And give you this. She pulled a small envelope from her pocket. It's some letters from him, from prison, when recently, and a photo. I thought maybe you'd want to destroy them yourself. Or not. Whatever you want. I took the envelope. I didn't open it. I set it on the coffee table. How are you, Haley? She let out a short, humorless laugh. How can anyone be? I was a murderer's useful idiot. I believed in a fairy tale that was actually an instruction manual for a crime. My family looks at me with pity. My friends don't know what to say. I dropped my thesis. I can't go back to campus to that neighborhood without seeing him on every corner. You weren't stupid. You were manipulated by a professional. He was good at it. He had years of practice with me, I said, surprised by the lack of resentment in my voice. Toward her, at least. But you saw it. You suspected. I only saw what I was forced to see. Her eyes filled with tears. And because of me, he felt validated. I fed his monster. No, I said firmly. He was already a monster. You just gave him a more flattering mirror to look into. The blame belongs entirely to him, Haley. Only Julian. You are another victim. Collateral damage. She looked at me, searching for sincerity in my words. She must have found it because she nodded slowly and wiped her eyes. I've been thinking about moving far away. To Italy, maybe. Start from scratch. Like you. Not like me, I corrected with a hint of a smile. Like you. Find your own way. But yes, go. The air here is poisoned for both of us. She stood up. Thank you, Morgan. For not hating me. And I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry too, I said. And I meant it. For the girl full of illusions who had been shattered. Take care, Haley. When she left, the silence returned, but this time with a tinge of peace. I burned the envelope with the letters in the electric fireplace without looking at the contents. The fake, controlled flames devoured the last tangible trace of that poisoned love. The following months were filled with methodical movement. I liquidated my stake in the consulting firm. It wasn't a dramatic goodbye. I left them with a perfectly ordered project and walked away with my share of the capital. I started my own firm, Blake Strategic Consulting. Small, selective. I would only take a couple of projects a year, the ones I actually wanted to do. My office was my laptop and my phone. Freedom was my new partner. And then the final piece, a home. I didn't want a penthouse in Manhattan. I wanted the horizon. I found an old renovated fisherman's cottage on a solitary cliff in Bar Harbor, Maine. It wasn't luxurious. It was made of stone with small, sturdy windows that faced an Atlantic Ocean that changed moods by the hour. I bought it in cash. No mortgage, no shared debt. It was entirely mine. The day I moved in for good, I loaded my SUV with only the essentials, clothes, some books, my laptop, and a small box, with the only photos I had saved of my parents, my sister Hannah, and a trip to Iceland years ago before everything. Twisted. Nothing from my life with Julian. That had been erased. The first night in the cottage, the wind howled outside, battering the windows. I lit the wood-burning fireplace, its crackle, the only sound besides the crashing waves below. I poured myself a glass of crisp Oregon Pinot Gris. It wasn't poisoned scotch. It was light, acidic, alive. The next day, my sister Hannah came to visit from Chicago. We spent the day walking along the rocky cliffs, not talking much, but her silent, solid presence was the best housewarming gift. At dusk, as we cooked together, she broke the ice. So what now, Morgan? Are you going to become a hermit who writes curses in Old English? I smiled. No, I'm going to become a woman who works 4 hours a day, reads horror novels, learns to identify bird calls, and occasionally takes on a fascinating project just for the thrill of solving it. Sounds good. She looked at me seriously. Do you ever think about him? About Julian, I asked, tasting the pasta sauce. I think about him less and less. And when I do, it's like thinking about a character in a really bad novel I read a long time ago. With anger sometimes, with disgust, but never with fear anymore, and never ever with pain. Hannah nodded, satisfied. I'm glad, because you've earned this peace the hard way. A year later, sitting on the small stone porch overlooking the infinite ocean with my laptop closed after a productive but unhurried morning of work, I received an email from Evelyn. It was brief. Julian Thorne. First appeal denied. Problematic behavior inside. Shows no cooperation. He will be there a very long time. I read it twice. Then I deleted the email. It wasn't news. It was a distant echo of a shipwreck from which I had miraculously swam away. That afternoon, the sea was calm silver beneath a pale sun. I brought out a bottle of that same Pinot Gris and a single glass. I poured. The golden, brilliant liquid caught the light. I didn't toast to the future, because I no longer needed to project myself so far ahead. I didn't toast to the past because it no longer belonged to me. I brought the glass to my lips, feeling the cool crystal. I took a deep breath, the salty air filling me with a deep, conquered peace. To me, I said quietly. And the wind carried the words away, blending them into the eternal sound of the sea. The taste of the wine was clean, alive, and completely mine.